In the 210th Block Talks, we speak with Sebastian Pfeiffer, MD at the Impossible Cloud Foundation, who tells us how decentralization can take cloud computing to the next level. I'm your host, Mauricio Magaldi, and this is Blockdrops, your weekly digest on blockchain for business. These news are not a form of endorsement, sponsorship, or encouragement for consumption, and are meant for educational purposes only. All right, everybody, I'm here with Sebastian Pfeiffer, who's going to tell us who he is and what he does with blockchain. Sebastian, welcome to BlockTalks.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here. So, Sebastian Pfeiffer, as you say, I'm the managing director of the Impossible Cloud Network Foundation. In essence, I think we'll get into it in a bit more detail, but in essence, what we do is we are working on the next evolution of the cloud.
How did you end up in blockchain? What was the thing that clicked for you that said, what I'm doing isn't what I want to do? I want to do that other thing. How did it happen?
Yeah, let me take a step back because I think it's a kind of unusual story, I would say. So, what the concept of blockchain, where it was first introduced to me, was during my business studies. So basically, during my bachelor's and master's, I don't know which one it was. Essentially, just other students said, "Okay, have you ever looked at this?" Right. So pretty much like most of us stumbled upon it. Right. Back in the days, it was more like a vague concept to me. First, it was a technology, and during the second phase, it was the speculation angle. But like it kind of stuck, but it didn't really make sense during the first time it was introduced to me, right? So I kind of parked it to the side. I did think it was very curious about it, the technology aspect behind it, but I didn't immediately go into it. Fast forward, what was it? Almost 3 years in management consulting, of all things. Um, and this time really allowed me to kind of aggregate a toolkit, like from scratch. I was able to learn from really, really inspiring people. And towards the end of those 3 years, I was approached by Impossible Cloud back in the days. And they just it immediately clicked, right? So they had this decentralization blockchain angle very clearly mapped out, the way that you can leverage this, and what the problems that can be fixed with this, right? um, while also, coming from a web 2 side, because the founders are very much exactly from that, right? So one of the co-founders is Kai. He founded a Good Game Studios. Maybe some of the listeners might actually know it. And what he discovered during, scaling this from the ground up is the cloud costs, and that there's not really too many alternatives, right? So it's hundreds of millions that he paid to cloud providers, and there's not really a lot of alternatives. And again, that was the kind of the inception, the thought of why Impossible Cloud Network came to be. And again, this just clicked to me, right? So basically, you have this very much seasoned entrepreneurs that very much matched my toolkit. And at the same time, you have blockchain that enables us, and decentralization that enables us to achieve all these things, and at the end provide a true alternative to challenge these providers.
Cool. Um, it's it's common to say that blockchains are a solution looking for a problem, right? It's this kind of it's wearing out in light of stable coins, I say. But it's still the killer use case. It's also by and large the single use case that is dramatically popular. When you think about the decentralized cloud, what are the other problems that or use cases you're trying to enable that would benefit from decentralization?
First of all, let me start off by saying I love what you just said, that it's solution looking for a problem. So that's exactly why this made sense to me, right? So if, I think maybe before I go in, what kind of problems we're solving, just to give the users a bit of perspective, what cloud actually is. Yeah. So what cloud is, let's say you're using an iPhone, right? You take a couple of photos here and there, and what you do usually is you are syncing your photos with an iCloud server, right? So in essence, you are renting Apple's or their partners' hardware, where you park your photos, right? So that's cloud in and of itself. However, of course the whole industry is that in complex and much larger, right? So this is what 300 something plus billion a year, growing despite the size 30% annually. So it's a huge market, and it's growing dynamically. Just for the users, again, because most of them, they think, okay, cloud is kind of boring, you know. But let me tell you, it's actually very intriguing, and it's very important as well that we are here. Um, Now you're asking, okay, what does decentralization offer here, right? So uh, I think first of all, let's start with the foundational, almost an ethos way. Um, that probably you're going to say, okay, everybody says this, which is, just don't think it's a good idea to have the majority of all the business's infrastructure run on one country's three providers, right? Just politics aside, not sure that's a good idea, right? That's a very ethos-driven foundational aspect. I would say beyond that, it does provide a lot of advantages, right? So from a data sovereignty aspect, and that actually is something where we see inbound traction, is what we can offer is a exactly that, a solution to that. So a very permissionless way you can onboard, and you can be sure that just we're not able to ever switch you off, right? That's one. Two, you can park your data where you want. So we can make it very regional, restrictive. Yeah? So in a sense, AWS has 30 hubs around the world. We can have hundreds or even thousands of hubs around the world, right? So you can make it very targeted of where you leverage the service. And then three, what this also allows, and that's why it becomes very important, I believe, in the foreseeable future, is with the advent of AI, what you are able to do is you can achieve a lot better performance. You can achieve a lot lower latency that will allow all these use cases to flourish. Because again, remember, 30 hubs around the world, it just doesn't sound that much if you think of it, right? And if you consider how big they are. And what we can do is we can offer much more targeted, smaller hubs. And you can only do that in the speed, to be fair, right? In the speed with decentralization, because we have other people providing the hardware to our network. So again, you have basically all these advantages that are accumulating. I would almost call it like a superpower. You can overnight, you can scale a network. I think a lot of projects has proven this in the past. You mentioned this. There's others decentralized cloud providers, but what not too many of them have been able to do, Maurizio, is they have been able to land this with customers. And we started exactly that way. We said, okay, let's have a first use case that works, which for us is S3, right? S3 is for the user listening, and it's basically the de facto standard for storage, right? And by the way, if you think storage is boring, storage is also an underlying foundation to AI. Anyway, basically, we started here. We said, okay, let's solve this problem first. Right now, we have more than 1,000 business customers using the ecosystem, close to 7 million recurring revenue. So I would say, like, we kind of have the foot in the door. We've proved, okay, this can work. And now we can use the power of Web3. Now that we have this product market fit, we use the superpower of Web3 to scale this, right? And I think that's and I'm coming together now as a sense of you have these advantages. You just need to make sure that whatever you provide to the customer is not some, it's not something else. It's completely different from what they currently have and cheaper. You want to make sure it's at least as good. Basically, the experience, the product experience is very smooth, similar to what they use now, plus other benefits.
In terms of industry adoption, are there any particular sectors that you've seen bigger adoption for Impossible Cloud? Because I understand that not only there are jurisdictional differences, but some industries are more regulated than others in the same jurisdiction. So I would, and and it's just funny aside. I mean, I couldn't tell myself 10 years ago that I would be disinterested in regulation as I've become working in crypto, but yet here we are.
It's interesting that you ask that because how cloud works, it's a bit different from a sales perspective, right? So we don't actually have that much visibility on who the end customer is. So how it works is just a bit of a deep dive. Is essentially you have distributors and resellers that sit on top of the ecosystem that then sell a bundle, a software product that we are the endpoint to, right? The software bundle to the end customers, and we don't have that much visibility of who the end customer is. All we say is to the we can tell the distributor and the reseller, hey guys, this is us. That's what we can offer at this price point with this whatever performance metrics, and then they derive, okay, who is the best customer to sell this to. Of course, we based on the distributors and resellers, we can kind of guess, right? And for us, where we see a lot of pickup, of course, is in the European, especially EU driven area, right? So we see that customers that based on the GDPR regulation, based on the sensitivity of their data, we can see a lot of pickup in these industries, and especially interestingly, especially from smaller and mid-sized entities, right? Because they are the ones that are really, cautious of what's going on. Like the big enterprises, they usually have their own solutions, meaning either on-prem or some other workaround. And we see the biggest pickup with these smaller and mid-sized entities. And the good news is there is a lot of them, right? So I think we're just at the starting point.
In terms of servicing, I mean, you're tapping into the power of blockchain to scale, which is one of the legs of the trilemma, of the blockchain trilemma, scalability. But that aside, are what's the pickup on the Web3 builders side? Because there's obviously applications running on blockchains that require a server of some kind to manage the interfaces and the on and off chain relationship. Um, what's that like in terms of playing to the to the home crowd?
No, 100%. And I again, a very good question. Where I I think it's kind of an open secret, right? So a lot of projects, Web3 projects, actually run on Web2 infrastructure, right? Which is kind of a shame, right? I mean, we talk about this ethos day in and day out, and then we run on whatever the traditional cloud. I think if we like of course we're in talks, right? So for instance, we had one Web3 gaming project that migrated their data infrastructure to ours, right? It happens. But I would say we are more or less again at the starting point. Why? Because we said let's focus on one use case specifically, which is S3. And this is mostly secondary data, right? So this is backup or data recovery use cases. And where we are now is after the launch, we said, okay, once we have that use case solved and we want to scale that, right, we want to focus on onboarding more services, because like you say, you have all these projects that use this Web2 infrastructure. Why are they not migrating? Well, the thing is, I mean, let's face it, there's a reason why the big tech companies are as successful as they are, because the product, the service suite that they can offer is just unmatched, right? So it I would say it's really hard um, to be able to accommodate all the different needs from these projects, because there's so many sub services that they use. I mean, AWS has what, 200 plus services, right? So all these they use leverage all these services, and it's really hard to match all of them. So again, I think we're just at the starting point. One use case, let's solve that, let's scale it, and now we are focusing on onboarding more use cases. And based on that, I think once we have that multi suite offering, then we can approach and get onboarded many more Web3 projects. And yes, I agree. Maybe one last point here is that when you go to these conventions, you talk to these people. I would say 99 out of 100 people that I meet are really interested in what we do. We can't yet service all of their needs.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's the early days of technology as such. Now, you mentioned I'm a product person, so you mentioned the user experience that is very similar, if not better, to the current thing, quote unquote, right? But you're a decentralized cloud network, so I'm thinking you were talking about more of the developer or user end of that. What is life like for the people who are or businesses who are supporting the network, the decentralized participants. What's life like to them? Like if today I want to spin up a server node, I don't know how you call it, for the Impossible Network. How do I do that? What's the path there?
Right. So we have essentially three elements to the ecosystem. Yeah. So we have let's start with the hardware provider use case, which is people that just want to supply hardware to the network. They can do that, right? I do want to caution here that because we come from a very demand driven logic, we only onboard really enterprise grade stuff. I mean, there's a lot of projects that claim this. And for us, what does that mean? You have to have certain SLAs. You have to be co-located in data centers, right? You have to have certain certification that's coming out of the data center, right? All these things need to be fulfilled because, again, we have like enterprise grade customers that need this, that require this, right? So I think that's first as a hardware persona. Then we have the service providers. So what we offer, I mean, again, we did the first one ourselves. Right now, we encourage others to basically leverage the proven system that we have. So basically, anybody can, as a developer, right? You can leverage the ecosystem and kind of place your own cloud services on whatever networks infrastructure that you want, right? That's the second one, and I think what makes us unique is how we implement it is essentially like a mix and match logic. So let's say you have a Kubernetes orchestration layer that you want to put on top. Um, that can be matched and mixed with whatever an inference use case or whatever, right? So essentially, it's a really really composable service landscape. And then we have the third element, which is we call it hypernodes. But at the end of the day, what they do is they validate both the service and the hardware network just to make sure A, it's running smoothly, and B, of course, provide a accountability and transparency layer on top of all of this, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all about, right? So it's fully permissionless and it's trustless.
Got it. My day job is as head of product for a blockchain that is privacy first, zero knowledge proof, privacy first, and privacy is something that I value a lot, not because of the gig, um, but because I'm also a former chief data officer, and I got all the way from the GDPRs of the world and all that stuff. Um, Very much interested in understanding how do you see privacy in Web3, and what are potentially mechanisms you've put in place to ensure that even if it's a permissionless network of nodes and operators, that you can retain industry grade privacy. Because I bet some of the industries that are trying to use your infrastructure have GDPR like and even more strict privacy rules to abide by.
So there's a few layers to this. I mean, let's first establish what privacy really means. And I would argue that um, the privacy in the sense of Web3 is not necessarily the privacy that the customer has in mind, right? And by customer, this can be Web3 customer, to be fair, but for us, it's really these enterprise grade, mostly Web2 customers, and what they care about, as you say, is to comply with regulation, right? What they, at the end of the day, want to make sure is all legal check marks are done and the data is encrypted to whatever degree that they seem feasible, right? So we have, as a starting point, when the data comes in, we call it like triple encryption, right? So it's there's server side encryption, there's in transit encryption. So basically, nobody, even if you were able to access the data, you wouldn't be able to decrypt it, right? So that's one on the, I would call that on the software level privacy, right? Then we have the element of the blockchain in and of itself, right? Because as you mentioned, it's publicly accessible. For us, the blockchain is merely a transactional layer. That's it. So what we do is we make sure that the hardware runs accordingly to what the characteristics it states, right? Is it still available? Is it sitting in the region? Is it online? And so on and so forth. But beyond that, the blockchain doesn't touch the data. that was very crucial for our customers because the customer says we don't want any of their data visible on the chain, right? So that's why we kind of separate the two. The protocol makes just make sure that the service is running smoothly, the hardware is performing the way it should be, and that's basically the blockchain part, right? So the data actually never touches the blockchain. I realize there's other projects out there that really much put data on the blockchain. Um, I think there's a lot of rivers that run into the sea. We just didn't identify this as a product market fit.
We're talking about the system and the architecture and all that, and I want to kind of dig a little bit more into your experience. I mean, you came from consulting background, and if I got this right, you're the managing director for the Impossible Cloud Network Foundation. Um, we're in a moment in terms of framing of regulation that is pointing. And there's, I'm basing my question on a recent article by the folks at A16Z Crypto. Um, their legal team wrote the case for ending the crypto foundation model, which was in early days legal architecture that was, I think, inaugurated by the Ethereum Foundation in the Crypto Valley in Switzerland to kind of circumvent the token being a security. In a nutshell, that's what it attempted to do. It wasn't 100% successful, but that was the model that permeated the industry from 10 years ago to very recently. There are a few major chains that don't have the Labs Foundation dual model, and there are some that still do, and some that they don't. They are just the foundation, or sometimes just the labs, and we're seeing an accommodation. And as the regulations come into play and take shape into a more crypto friendly world, um, we don't know what the model is going to look like. What's your analysis of this scenario? Is the same reason from 10 years ago, the reason why you guys have the foundation? Can you tell me what the role of the foundation is? Do you have a labs? Is this all decentralized? Talk me through a little bit of that construct and what the ecosystem is shaping to look like for you.
Very interesting question. I mean, let me start up by saying I'm not a lawyer. Yeah, so this is my pragmatic view on things. We're actually also based in Switzerland. Fun fact. So we're not too far from the Ethereum Foundation. It's actually where I sit right now. So I think overall, what we chose is a very, I would say, very safe approach. So what we went with is like you say, let's run with the established approach, which is this foundation model, right? We're basically governed by FINMA, although technically wherever you release the token, you need to be complying with that regulation as well, right? So what we said, okay, let's start with FINMA, which is again the financial authority here in Switzerland. Um, let's comply with that on a utility basis, and this is basically the gold standard, which then allows us to scale globally. So wherever you offer a token, you're pretty much on a safe side that you also comply with that regulation. And my initial, my initial reaction to this is that to a certain degree, it's almost unfair, I would say, because as we have to comply with all this regulation, and let me tell you, it's not only costs involved, it also has a lot of impact on tokenomics, on marketing. Like we literally have to be careful in putting emojis in, in our Twitter posts, right? Because I'm not going to go into detail here, but the point is that it's almost unfair because you have these whatever Cayman Island constructs that can do a lot more, on a practical level. I still believe that we are on the right path here because all this regulation aside, what we want to do here, and as an industry, what we should focus on is we should solve problems, right? We started out this way, Maurizio, right at the beginning of the podcast. At the end of the day, any project should ask itself, okay, what am I trying to solve? And what's the best solution to this? And most of the time, it's not, okay, I have this token, I want to pump the token, right? It should be, what's the underlying product beneath that, right? And I think for most projects, or not for most, for some projects, it's just about, how do we get this token out and how do we basically profit off of it. So it's kind of a casino at the end of the day, right? And I believe that regulation, the main purpose of it should be, giving a framework that projects can operate in. And if you work with the utility framework, that's exactly what you want to do. You want to focus on solving problem, and basically enabling this community that we're all in to work towards exactly that, solving that exact problem. And if you only have, pumping the token as your problem, I don't know. I think that's a bit thin on the narrative level over time, because it's bound to fail. We are bound to fail as an industry if we don't, get real world traction going at some
Mhm.
point. No.
Yeah, this is a great segue to a next question. As an industry, what is the one problem that we must fix right now to avoid working another 15, 20 years and realizing, oh my God, we didn't fix that one, and now we're back to square one? What is the one thing and why?
Yeah, I can answer you directly. It's basically what I just said in a nutshell, meaning we need to be demand driven. We cannot have technology as the sole purpose of what we're doing and trying to put products on top of it. We need to find an angle of saying, what can we, at the end of the day, that's what it is, right? Yes, it's community driven and we can all achieve this together. It has certain advantages, but it's a technology, right? That's how the concept was first introduced to me, and I still think it holds true. um, let's Someone explained this the other day, of he used the analogy of the barcode, right? You don't go into the supermarket and say, okay, I buy this product because it has a better barcode, right? Or I go into this supermarket because it has barcodes and the other doesn't. That's not how it works, right? It's a technology that offers advantages, and we need to leverage these advantages. So as an industry, any projects out there shouldn't start with, okay, we have this technology, how do we make a product out of it? Let's find a problem, and if blockchain isn't the right technology to solve it, all right, that's it, let's accept it, right? But there is 100% problems that blockchain can solve, right? And I think what we've proven so far is, yes, there is avenues for that, and that's something that all of the, even if you're starting out, if you're already, kind of mature as a project, at the end of the day, you need to focus on exactly that. What's the demand and how do you scale that?
Agree. Agree. That's it's the whole point of jobs to be done. Clayton Christensen and all that. So yeah, absolutely subscribe to that. As this is an industry that doesn't sleep at all, and it's FOMO driven, narrative driven, and all that stuff. How do you keep yourself healthy mentally and physically to avoid dying of FOMO working in Web3?
um So first of all, I think we need to all relax a bit. Yeah. Yes, it's FOMO driven, but I mean, okay, I realize I'm sounding kind of like a repetitive argument here. But if you work on an underlying, solution that's scaling, you can ignore a bit of the noise, right? Because you're going to be a healthy project. You're still going to be there in 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years. All good, right? Where's the FOMO coming from? It's like people are looking for these new this, new that, right? Um, at the end of the day, I try to use AI more and more in the sense of having it digest information for me. I realize it's a bit of a risk in and of itself, right? But just to stay on top of things. And two, connected to this, I actually have something that probably some of the listeners are going to scream at me now. I actually have a physical newspaper as a subscription, because this is curated information, and it's only hits me once a week, right? And this is like, this is the stuff that goes in depth, right? All the stuff I need to be aware of, this AI flags me, and the rest I just take my time and digest that information that way.
Do you have any physical routine or diet that you follow? What's the on the physical side? What's the scheme there?
Right. I'm a very much an enthusiast of intermittent fasting, so I do that. And yeah, I mean, ever since I grew up, really, sports is just an essential part of my life. So I bake that in there as well, right? So I have blockers in my calendar. Every once in a while, I simply go out, do some sports, and yeah, sometimes a weekend in Web3 doesn't really exist. But it's sometimes good just to switch off, right? So if at least if it's for a Sunday or something, just switch off the notifications, go outside, take a breath, enjoy family time if you have it. I think that's for me that's very key, right? I do have a healthy family, and I try to keep that relationship. Don't forget about the important parts of life there.
Absolutely. In terms of um, onboarding new people, like you worked in the non Web3 industry and now you're in Web3, your old colleagues call Sebastian, Bitcoin hit a new all time high. How do I get into crypto? Probably not the best incentive to get into crypto in all time highs, but um, what is your approach to educating and welcoming people in the industry, whether it's like an investor mindset or a builder? What is your, I know you have this institutional role to play, but on a friend to friend, checkpoint, what do you usually recommend to them?
Right. So I would say there's three main things that they could um, filter in all of this noise. One is, I mean, let's face it, I'm not a big fan of it, but there is a way, get rich quick scheme, meme coins, it's a thing, right? What I usually tell them is, if you do that, be prepared to, burn some money. Um, but it's a thing, right? That's technically something crypto is for. I wouldn't recommend that as the first angle, but take that as is. Fair enough. I do would say there's the second off angle of all these foundational things that are ongoing. You mentioned stable coins. That's that's something that could be interesting going forward. I tend to be a bit hesitant if you mentioned how do people get into the industry, if that's going to be your main use case going forward, because to me it's yeah, it's almost a how do you put this? It's a almost like a schizophrenic way of saying, okay, we have these two duopolies in stablecoin that basically rule everything with 10, 15 people, so if you go into that, it's going to be very dangerous, or not dangerous. It's going to be tricky to, onboard your service. So I'd just be a bit hesitant. So that's at least the second bucket. And then the third one, it just keeps coming back to this is, okay, what problem do you identify? And is blockchain really the way to solve that? And I do think cloud, I always use cloud when I talk to these friends that are non-crypto, non-Web3. I think cloud is just, it's the, to me, it's just a logical thing where crypto and blockchain can make a difference. You can scale a network. That's a very easy to explain mechanism. You have people providing their hardware rather than you scaling on your own. So you're much faster, you're much more efficient. And you can use that in a very effective way to address a problem, right? So that's usually how I tell them what I do, and something that I think it's still fruitful to work on going forward.
Love that approach. Very educational. I like that. One of the reasons why I keep doing the show. Listen, man, we're about the end of our time, but wanted to kind of open up for you, any parting words and how people can get, to talk to you, chat with you online, find stuff about Impossible Cloud and whatnot.
Happy to. So everybody that's listening in, that's intrigued, ICN.global, you can find all the socials, all the information there. I would specifically, also thanks for all the people that know us already, that have been supporting us so far. If you're interested in collaborating, I would say, as a hardware provider, reach out at any time. We're scaling, as mentioned. Um, and as a builder as well, right? I think we've proven that we can make this network work. And if you have a good idea for a cloud service, feel free to reach out. And to all the listeners listening in, thanks so much for having us, Maurizio.
No worries, man. Thanks, and yeah, hopefully we run into each other in a crypto conference somewhere around the world. Thanks.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Catch us online. We're on Instagram at BlockDropsPodcast, on Twitter at BlockDropsPod or 0x Mauricio. We're on Lens at blockdrops.lens, We have a newsletter on LinkedIn. Write to us at blockdropspodcast@gmail.com, and you can listen to the Blockdrops podcast at Spotify, iColab, Faberbun Tech, and all of the other major streaming platforms. Yay! Shout out to Sebastian for sharing his journey in and around crypto with us. Don't forget to leave the ratings on your favorite player and check out the merch store at blockdropspodcast.xyz. This is all for today. Stay rare, stay weird. LFJ.